Her husband beat and humiliated his wife so badly that she fled the house and changed her face. Blood dripped from her broken lip, leaving a scarlet trail on the cold marble. Jimena breathed heavily, her chest rising and falling with difficulty, while the burning sensation on her cheek throbbed in time with her own fear. Esteban stood in front of her, his eyes burning with rage, his fists still clenched tightly. "Look at yourself," he spat with contempt, adjusting the sleeves of his perfectly ironed shirt. "You always force me to do this." Jimena did not respond. She knew that any words would only make the situation worse. Her entire body trembled, not only from the pain but also from the humiliation of being on the floor again, under his control again, feeling her will break little by little. The penthouse where they lived was a reflection of the image Esteban projected to the world. Impeccable, luxurious, unattainable. Huge windows revealed Mexico City in all its nocturnal splendor. But for Jimena, that view was nothing but cruel irony. She could see freedom out there, but she could never reach it. "You promised me you wouldn't talk to anyone without my permission," Esteban continued in a colder tone, but still laden with threat. "And yet I saw you smiling at the delivery man, as if you were a slut." Jimena closed her eyes. It wasn't the first time he had accused her of something so ridiculous, and it wouldn't be the last. Esteban walked over to the dining room table and took his glass of red wine. He took a slow sip, as if he needed to calm down, as if he were allowing himself to enjoy his triumph before continuing with his lecture. "You have a life that many women," Jimena said, turning to look at her again. "I give you everything. Houses, jewelry, cars, everything you could ever want. But you continue to behave this way." Esteban tilted his head. "You're sorry," he repeated with a crooked smile, one that contained not a hint of tenderness, only amusement. Cruel. He didn't seem to feel sorry. He crouched down next to her and lifted her face with his fingertips. Jimena felt his wine-scented breath mingle with hers, her heart beating frantically in her chest. "Say it again." "I'm sorry," he repeated with tears in his eyes. Esteban watched her for a moment longer, like a predator analyzing its prey before the final blow. Then he smiled. "That's better." He stood up and walked away as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't hit her, as if the blood on her lip didn't exist. Jimena remained on the floor, hugging her own legs. She knew she shouldn't move. Still, she knew that any movement could irritate him again. The sound of his watch ticking filled the tense silence. Esteban checked his phone, then headed for the bedroom. "Tomorrow we have dinner with the people from the firm," he said without turning to look at her. "Put on something appropriate, something I choose." And with that, he left her alone. Jimena waited several minutes before moving. When she finally got up, she did so clumsily. Her legs were weak. Her hands were shaking. She approached the large window and rested her forehead against the cold glass. From there, she could see the whole world continuing to turn without her. Cars moving, lights twinkling in the distance. People living their lives without cages. She tried to remember the last time she had felt free. She couldn't, and that broke her soul. The sun was just beginning to filter through the heavy curtains when Jimena opened her eyes, not because she had slept well, but because her body had already gotten used to waking up before Esteban did. It was a silent routine of survival. If he opened his eyes first, she would most likely start the day with humiliation or a blow. She lay still for a few minutes, listening to his controlled, slow breathing on the other side of the bed. She counted the seconds mentally, waiting for his alarm clock to go off. The sound was a simple, discreet beep, but Jimena felt a chill run down her spine. She slowly turned toward Esteban. He frowned, but did not wake up. Sighing silently, she got up cautiously and went to the bathroom. When she turned on the light, her reflection in the mirror greeted her brutally. The swelling on her cheek had gone down, but a purplish shadow was still visible. Her lower lip had a small crack that burned when she tried to open her mouth. She brought her hand to her face carefully. She no longer cried when she saw herself like this. She had gotten used to it. She looked up at the security camera in the corner of the bathroom and stared at it with a blank expression. Esteban didn't just control her when they were together. He did it even when he wasn't around. Every room in the penthouse had cameras discreetly hidden among the minimalist decorations. Jimena couldn't move without him knowing. She quickly washed her face quickly and dressed in a simple black dress. Any attempt to express her personality through clothing had been eliminated years ago. Her closet was full of clothes chosen by Esteban: tight dresses, high heels, sober colors. Nothing that made her feel comfortable. Nothing that made her feel like herself. When she came out of the bathroom, she found him awake, sitting on the bed, checking his phone. His jaw was tense, as if something was bothering him. "Why did you take so long in the bathroom?" he asked without looking up. "I was just washing my face," she replied in a low voice. He turned his face toward her slowly, analyzing every gesture, then motioned for her to come closer. Jimena obeyed. When she was close enough, he raised his hand and caressed her injured cheek with his knuckles. "You look awful," he commented with a sigh. "We can't go out like this. I'll talk to Lucia to come and do your makeup before dinner." Lucia, the stylist who always made her look perfect for Esteban's social events, was not an option. It was an order. "Thank you," she whispered. Although every word tasted like poison, the day passed like any other. Jimena moved around inside the glass cage she lived in, with guards stationed at the entrance to the apartment and in the lobby of the building. She had no access to bank cards or her passport, or even a personal phone. If she needed to do anything outside the house, she had to ask Esteban, and he would decide whether it was necessary or not. Breakfast was served promptly at 8 a.m. Esteban talked about business, investments, and the incompetence of his employees. Jimena nodded and smiled when he expected her to, feigning interest. When they finished, Esteban got up, adjusted his suit, and looked at her with the same superiority as always. "Don't go out today. I have important things to attend to, and I don't want any distractions." Jimena just nodded. She never went out anyway. The afternoon dragged on slowly. Jimena sat by the window, watching the city as she did every day. She wondered what it would be like to walk the streets without fear, without feeling that someone was following her, without the certainty that a single mistake could cost her another beating. She remembered her attempts to escape. The first had been stupid and impulsive. They had only been together for a year when she understood what Esteban really was. One night, taking advantage of the fact that he was fast asleep, she tried to leave the penthouse. The problem was that she was never alone. A guard intercepted her at the door. He didn't have to do anything to her. He just told Esteban. That night, Jimena learned what true terror was. The second time, she was more careful. For weeks, she pretended that everything was fine. She didn't argue with Esteban. He didn't ask questions or show any signs that something was wrong. She waited patiently for an opportunity. When Esteban had to travel to Monterrey on business, she thought it was her moment. The guard at the door was new. Maybe she could bribe him. It didn't work. When Esteban returned, he was furious, but he didn't yell or hit her. He took her by the hand with a smile and led her to the living room. On the table was a velvet box containing a diamond necklace. "You are mine, Jimena." His voice was calm, but the message was clear. You don't need to go anywhere. That day, she understood that she could never escape. But now, something had changed inside her. If you're rooting for her to break free, tap like, so this story reaches more people who need it. Maybe it was the accumulated pain, maybe it was the exhaustion, but something told her that this time, she would not give up. What Jimena did not know was that Esteban felt it too, and that he was preparing his own move. Jimena could not remember the last time she had felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps when she was a child, when she still dreamed of a life far from the screams and shadows. But hope was dangerous. Hope had led her to try to escape before, and hope had led her to end up on the floor with her face marked by Esteban's blows. Even so, that night, for the first time in years, a spark was lit inside her. The television in the penthouse was on, playing a documentary about extreme changes in appearance. It wasn't something that normally interested her, but her mind was exhausted, and any distraction was welcome. The screen showed images of patients before and after radical plastic surgery, people with completely different faces, impossible to recognize, women fleeing from pasts they wanted to forget. A phrase from the surgeon who appeared on the screen struck her like lightning. Sometimes changing your face is the only way to start a new life. Jimena felt the air catch in her throat. Her trembling hand rose to her own face, caressing her cheek where traces of the last beating still remained. Could it be possible? For a second, her brain was filled with chaotic questions, doubts, fears. But among them all, one idea clung tightly. If she changed her face, if she became someone else, Esteban would never find her. It was impossible. It was impossible. It was her only way out. Jimena turned off the TV with a bang, her heart pounding. She turned her head toward the security camera in the corner of the living room. She had lived under this inhuman surveillance for so long that her body had become accustomed to moving cautiously, breathing quietly, existing without attracting attention. But this time, she felt that the air was charged with something different. The plan began to form in her mind, like pieces of a jumbled puzzle. She needed a surgeon, someone who could make the complete change, someone who could turn her into a new person. She needed money. She had no access to her accounts, her cards, nothing. Everything was controlled by Esteban. Above all, she needed to get out of there, out of the penthouse without being seen. The thought paralyzed her. How on earth would she do that? Her mind immediately took her back to her failed escape attempts. She remembered the cold of the early morning when she tried to escape via the fire escape and was caught by a guard. She remembered the feeling of her wrist being squeezed so hard that it left bruises for weeks. But this time had to be different. She couldn't fail. She couldn't afford to be caught again. A chill ran down her spine as she remembered what Esteban had said to her after her last escape attempt. "If you try to leave again, I won't lock you up. I won't hit you. I'll make you disappear." She had no doubt that he was capable of carrying out his threat. But now she had a plan and couldn't afford to fail. The next morning, Jimena woke up with a new determination in her chest. The first test came early when Esteban got out of the shower and approached the bed with an intense look. "You're coming with me to the office today," he said, adjusting his watch. "I don't want you to be here alone. You've been acting strange lately." Panic seized Jimena for a second. She suspected something. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to smile. "Of course, love." He narrowed his eyes, analyzing her. He seemed to relax. "Wear something elegant, and don't talk to anyone without my permission." Jimena nodded, feeling her heart in her throat. Her time was running out. Esteban's offices were located in an imposing skyscraper in downtown Mexico City. From the moment Jimena entered the building, she felt everyone's eyes on her, not because they recognized her, but because her presence there always caused a stir. She was Esteban's perfect woman, the trophy wife who always smiled at events and never spoke more than necessary. But this time, as she accompanied him through the marble hallways, something inside her roared loudly. She needed to find a way to access his accounts. The company computers were her best option. When Esteban entered a meeting with his team, Jimena waited a few minutes before acting. She calmly got up and left the office, walking with the confidence of someone who belonged there. "Mrs. Jimena, do you need anything?" asked the receptionist. "Yes," she replied in a firm voice. "My husband asked me to check some emails for him." The receptionist didn't hesitate for a second and gave her a computer. Jimena opened the browser, her hands trembling on the keyboard. She knew what she was looking for. Esteban's accounts were protected by multiple passwords, but he wasn't a cautious man. He used similar passwords for everything. She knew this because she had seen him do it more than once, entering them without bothering to hide them. She took a breath and typed in the first combination that came to mind. Error. She tried again. Error. Sweat trickled down her back. Third attempt. The screen changed. Access granted. Jimena held her breath. She couldn't empty the account. That would raise suspicions, but she could make a small transfer, something that would go unnoticed. She quickly entered the details of a new account she had created months ago, when she didn't yet have a clear plan. She deposited the money and logged out. When she returned to the office, her body was trembling, but her face was calm. Esteban didn't even notice she had left, but she knew that the real danger had not yet begun, because now that she had the money, the only thing left was to escape. The house where Jimena was being held prisoner was a golden cage surrounded by cameras, alarms, and guards who reported directly to Esteban. She knew that any attempt to escape had to be precise and quick, because a single mistake would mean brutal punishment. What she did not expect was the storm, the heavy rain, and the violent winds. began to affect the building's electrical system, causing the lights to flicker and the security to fail momentarily. The surveillance system suffered interference, and some cameras stopped working for a few minutes. Jimena noticed it immediately. She paid close attention to the pattern of the blackouts and realized that every few minutes a new lightning strike caused the power to fluctuate. It was the perfect moment. That night, Esteban was particularly tense. He had been suspicious for days that Jimena was plotting something. Paranoid as he was, he ordered the guards to be more vigilant, but at the same time, he was annoyed by the problems caused by the bad weather and sent Felix, his head of security, to personally check the system failures. This temporarily reduced the number of guards at the entrance to the penthouse. Jimena knew she had to act at that very moment. She took the bag with the money and false documents she had days earlier and calmly walked toward the service hallway where the emergency doors were located. There was only one guard nearby, distracted, trying to fix his radio, which had malfunctioned due to the storm. To avoid arousing suspicion, she pretended she was going to the kitchen and, at the last second, accidentally pushed a metal tray, making a loud noise on the floor. The guard immediately turned his head to see what had happened. That was the moment Jimena needed. She ran to the emergency door and used the key she had stolen months earlier. When she closed the door behind her, the sound of the storm enveloped her completely. The wind howled furiously, and the metal staircase shook with each gust. Her heart was beating so hard that she felt like she was going to collapse, but there was no time to hesitate. She went down the first step, then the second, and then began to run. The echo of her footsteps on the stairs was deafening. She knew it wouldn't be long before they noticed her absence. She knew that if anyone found her there, Esteban would make her regret ever being born. She went down one floor, then another. Adrenaline burned in her veins, and her mind screamed a single word: run. When she reached the ground floor, her chest burned from lack of air. The building's lobby was almost empty, except for a distracted receptionist looking at his phone behind the counter. Jimena took a deep breath and walked with a firm step, pretending she belonged there. Every second was hell. Every step, torture. The guard at the entrance glanced at her quickly, but she didn't hesitate. She kept walking just a few more meters. A deafening thunderclap shook the sky. The glass door was open, and the storm roared on the other side. When her feet touched the street, she felt her soul leave her body. She had made it. The rain hit her face, soaking her. When Jimena ran through the streets of Mexico City, with her heart pounding in her chest, and the icy water soaking us in the puddles, she feared it was Esteban who was coming after her. She didn't have much time. The address she had memorized was blurred in her mind due to panic and exhaustion, but she knew she had to get there. She had to find him, Dr. Alejandro Cruz, the only man capable of giving her a new face. The private clinic building was almost empty at that hour of the morning. The neon lights flickered in the reception area, and the only sound was the clock on the wall marking the cruel passage of time. Jimena pushed the glass door open with trembling hands, feeling the cold air conditioning. Seeing it felt surreal, as if her body knew that after tonight, her life would never be the same again. The receptionist, a woman with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, looked up with a surprised expression when she saw her. Jimena must have looked like a mess, her clothes wet, her makeup smudged, her lips trembling. "I need to see Dr. Cruz," she said in a broken voice. The woman announced, "The doctor has an appointment. Please, it's urgent." The receptionist looked at her suspiciously, but before she could respond, a door at the end of the hallway opened, and a tall man in a white coat with a tired expression appeared. It was him, Dr. Alejandro Cruz, the most renowned surgeon in the country, the man whose skill could save her life. "What's going on?" she asked the receptionist. The receptionist gave her a warning look, but Jimena didn't wait. She stepped forward and spoke quickly, her voice broken with desperation. "Doctor, I need your help." Alejandro looked at her cautiously, assessing her condition. "Are you injured?" Jimena shook her head. "Not in the way you think." A heavy silence fell between them. Alejandro crossed his arms, watching her with a mixture of interest and reserve. "If it's not a medical emergency, you need to make an appointment." Jimena felt panic. She couldn't waste any time. She took a step forward, her body still trembling. "I need surgery. A complete transformation. Alejandro looked at her incredulously. That's not something that can be done overnight. Who sent you? No one. I came because I researched it, because I know what you can do. Her voice broke. I need to be someone else. Alejandro blinked slowly, as if trying to decipher her. That's not something I take lightly, Miss Jimena, she whispered, although inside she felt that name no longer belonged to her. The doctor sighed, running a hand over his face. What you're asking me to do is not just anything. Plastic surgery is for correcting imperfections, for improving self-esteem, not for erasing identities. Jimena felt tears burning in her eyes. If I don't do it, they're going to kill me. That made the silence linger. Alejandro looked at her more closely, noticing the small bruises hidden under her pale skin, the barely visible scars on her neck and arms. He recognized them immediately. They weren't accident scars. They were marks from someone who had been hurt many times. Too many times. Who are you running from? He asked quietly. Jimena closed her eyes. From a man who won't accept that I'm gone. Alejandro clenched his jaw. He knew what that meant. He knew that if he agreed to help her, he would cross a line from which there would be no return. He remained silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on her. Then he exhaled with resignation and murmured, "If I do this, there will be no turning back." Jimena held his gaze, feeling the weight of those words. "I don't want to go back." Alejandro lowered his head, as if weighing the gravity of the decision. Finally, he nodded, and with that gesture, Jimena's foot was sealed. The small hotel where Jimena was staying was the kind of place where no one asked questions. Located on a narrow, quiet street on the outskirts of Mexico City, the building looked neglected, with worn walls and a musty smell permeating the old carpets. But it didn't matter. The only thing that mattered to Jimena was that she was safe there, at least for now. She had registered under a false name, using the documentation she had obtained before escaping. She didn't have much luggage, just a bag with the money she had managed to transfer, and some clothes she bought at a cheap store on the way. No credit cards, nothing that could trace her. She spent her first day at the hotel, locked in her room, unable to relax. Her hands trembled with every noise in the hallway, and her heart raced every time someone walked near her door. Esteban could show up at any moment. He could send someone. He could. She couldn't think about that. She had to focus on her plan. The surgery was her only chance to disappear completely. But before undergoing such a radical transformation, there were many things she had to do. Medical exams, evaluations, physical and mental preparation. She couldn't do it alone. She knew that at some point she would need help. And there was only one person she could trust. Lucia, her best friend. The only person who had ever told her the truth about Esteban. Jimena dialed the number with trembling fingers. She hadn't spoken to her in months. Not because she didn't want to, but because Esteban had forbidden it. Anyone who tried to open her eyes was eliminated from her life. The phone rang once, twice, and then Lucia's familiar voice answered cautiously. "Hello." Jimena closed her eyes tightly. "Before you speak, it's me." There was a silence, a long silence. Lucia's voice broke. She could hear her agitated breathing, the disbelief in her tone. "My God, tell me you're not with him anymore." Jimena swallowed hard. "I ran away." On the other end of the line, Lucia let out a trembling sigh. "Where are you?" "I can't tell you over the phone, but I need to see you." Lucia didn't hesitate for a second. "Tell me when and where." When Lucia entered the hotel room, the first thing she did was hug Jimena tightly. The hug was so unexpected that Jimena froze for a moment before giving in to her friend's warmth and letting the tears flow freely. "I thought you were dead," Lucia whispered against her hair. "You had no idea how scared I was." Jimena closed her eyes tightly. "I couldn't talk to anyone. He watched me all the time." Lucia pulled away slightly and looked her up and down, as if trying to convince herself that she was really there. "Jimena, God, Esteban did this to you." Jimena looked away. She didn't have to answer. Lucia cursed under her breath, holding back her fury. "That damn bastard. I need your help," Jimena interrupted. "And disappear forever." Lucia blinked in surprise. "Surgery is the only way. I can't hide forever. If I change my face, my identity, Esteban will never be able to find me." Lucia seemed to process the idea for a few seconds, and then, With the determination that had always characterized her, she nodded. "Tell me what you need." The following days were frantic. Lucia took care of everything. She made the medical appointments, paid for the lab tests in cash, and used her own ID to book appointments and prevent Jimena from leaving any traces. The tests confirmed that she was fit to undergo surgery, but what Jimena didn't expect was how hard it would be mentally. She spent entire nights awake, staring at her reflection in the hotel bathroom mirror, touching her own face, trying to imagine what it would be like to wake up and not recognize herself. Who would she be after this? Would she really cease to be Jimena? Or worse? And if she changed her face but still felt like the same broken woman? Lucia found her one morning, sitting on the floor, hugging her knees. "Are you scared?" she asked quietly. Jimena nodded without looking at her. Lucia sat down next to her and rested her head on her shoulder. "That woman you see in the mirror isn't you, Jimena. What would you do in her place at this exact moment? Share it in the comments. Your words might help someone watching right now. She's the shadow he created, but that's over now. You're going to be who you always should have been." Jimena closed her eyes and let the tears fall for the first time in a long time. She didn't feel completely alone when the day of the surgery arrived. Jimena dressed in the clothes Lucia had bought her. A loose sweater, simple jeans, comfortable shoes. Nothing flashy, nothing that would attract attention. Before leaving the hotel, Lucia took her hands and squeezed them tightly. "It doesn't matter how you look after this," she said seriously. "You will always be my best friend." Jimena smiled sadly. She wasn't sure if she would still be the same person, but she had no other choice. It was time to say goodbye to Jimena and welcome Elena. Pain was the first thing she felt when she woke up. It wasn't just any pain. It was deep and burning, as if her face had been torn off and rebuilt from the ground up. Every fiber of her skin throbbed with a stinging, burning sensation, as if an invisible fire were consuming her from within. Jimena tried to move, but her body was heavy, numb from the painkillers. Her breathing was weak, trapped inside the oxygen mask that covered her mouth and nose. She wanted to open her eyes, but something prevented her from doing so completely. Her eyelids were swollen, her face wrapped in tight bandages. Panic struck her immediately. She couldn't see. She couldn't recognize her own face. "Calm down," Alejandro's voice came from somewhere nearby. Calm, but with a hint of concern. Everything went well. Jimena tried to respond, but her throat was dry. Only a muffled moan came out of her mouth. Alejandro approached through the fog of pain and medication. Jimena felt his hand holding hers. It was an unexpectedly human, almost protective gesture. "The surgery was a success," he said in that professional tone he used to deliver bad news in the best possible way. "But it's going to be a difficult process. The pain will subside, but it will take time. Time." That word weighed on her like a stone in her chest. Jimena didn't have time. Every minute that passed was another minute that Esteban could find her. She tried to speak again, and this time her voice came out as a rough whisper. "How long?" Alejandro looked at her intently. "At least a month before you can move without risk. It will be months before your face heals completely." Jimena closed her eyes with force. Months was an eternity. Alejandro must have noticed the desperation in her expression, because his tone softened. "You have to trust me. If you rush, you could ruin everything." Jimena clenched her teeth. How could she explain to him that the only thing she had was the urgency to disappear? But she had no choice. She had come this far. She had to endure it. She had to be reborn. The following days were torture. The pain was unbearable. The medication kept her dazed, floating between consciousness and sleep, trapped in a blurred reality where Esteban was always about to find her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, his shadow in the room, his hand squeezing her neck, his venomous voice whispering in her ear that she would never escape him. She would wake up with a start, her heart racing and her body covered in cold sweat, and every time, Alejandro was there. He didn't say anything, but his presence was constant. Want to see what happens next? Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. At first, Jimena thought it was simple professionalism, that he was just doing his duty as a doctor, but over time, she realized that it was more than that. There was something in his gaze when he looked at her, Something more than medical concern, something more personal. Maybe it was because he was broken too. Maybe it was because he understood what it was like to lose someone. While Jimena struggled to heal, all hell broke loose outside. Esteban was beside himself the day he discovered her disappearance. The penthouse became a battlefield. He hit furniture, threw objects against the walls, and screamed until he was hoarse. No one dared to stop him. Felix, his security chief, remained silent while Esteban glared at him. "You swear you didn't see anything? You have no idea how she escaped." His voice was dangerous, restrained, like the calm before a storm. "Then tell me how she did it." Felix swallowed hard. The storm turned off the cameras for a few minutes. Maybe it was at that moment that Esteban fell silent, taking deep breaths, controlling his rage as if he were sharpening a knife. Then he smiled a cold smile. "You think he's free?" he said with chilling calm. "But he hasn't gone far." Esteban was not just any man. He had contacts, power, unlimited resources, and a single obsession: to bring back Jimena. "Find her," he ordered. "I don't care how much it costs. I don't care who has to disappear." Felix nodded and left the room immediately, fear clutching at his back. Meanwhile, Esteban poured himself a shot of whiskey and drank it in one gulp. He looked at his reflection in the window pane. "You think you can hide from me, princess?" he murmured with a cruel smile. "I'll find you, and when I do, there won't be a single place in the world where you can run again." Jimena knew nothing about this, but she sensed it. Even in the safety of Alejandro's clinic, with the doors closed and the curtains covering the windows, the feeling of danger never left her. She knew that somewhere out there, Esteban was looking for her. She knew that if he found her this time, there would be no warnings, no punishment, only death. But when she saw herself in the mirror for the first time after the surgery, something inside her changed. The bandages had been carefully removed, and the image reflected in the glass was not that of Jimena. It was someone else, a woman with higher cheekbones, a different nose, different lips. The swelling still hid the final result, but the transformation was clear. She was not the same, not Jimena anymore. "How do you feel?" Alejandro asked, watching her closely. She continued to look at her reflection, trying to find traces of the woman she once was, but there was nothing left. Only Elena, and for the first time in a long time, she felt hope. Elena woke up in the middle of the night with the feeling that someone was watching her. Her breathing was agitated, her skin cold and covered in sweat. She looked around, her chest rising and falling frantically, trying to make out shapes in the darkness of the room. Her heart pounded in her ears, but she was alone, or so it seemed. She sat up in bed, trembling, trying to calm herself. Her mind told her that no one was there, that the doors were locked, that Alejandro had personally checked before going to bed, but her instinct screamed otherwise. She got up and walked cautiously toward the window. The curtains were closed, but there was a small opening between them. She held her breath and looked through the space. Nothing, just the empty street lit by a streetlight with a few cars parked in the distance. Alejandro's clinic was located in a discreet area far from the hustle and bustle of the city center, but that didn't mean it was out of danger. It never was. She moved away from the glass with a chill running her back since the surgery. Her face had changed completely. She was no longer Jimena, but the fear inside her remained intact, as if her new skin wasn't enough to remove Esteban's shadow from her life. Every time she went out, she felt eyes on her. Every time she heard footsteps behind her, her chest tightened with terror. Was it just paranoia, or was he really looking for her? The next morning, Alejandro found her sitting in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee in her hands. "You didn't sleep," he said, not as a question, but as a statement. She looked at him. His shirt was slightly unbuttoned, and his hair was tousled, as if he hadn't rested well either since agreeing to help her. Alejandro had remained distant but present, as if he had put a barrier between them so as not to get too involved. But his eyes always analyzed her with something more than medical concern. "I can't help feeling that someone is following me." Alejandro crossed his arms, leaning against the doorframe. "No one knows who you are now. Not even Lucia has said anything. But he's looking for me. I know it." A silence fell between them. Alejandro exhaled heavily and sat down in front of her. What you're feeling is normal. You went through something inhuman. It's not easy to just turn off the fear." Elena looked away. It wasn't just fear, it was certainty. Elsewhere in the city, Esteban was staring at his computer screen with bloodshot eyes. The private detective he had hired spoke in a monotone voice as he showed him documents and records. "So far, we've investigated all transportation outlets, airports, luxury hotels. There's no trace of Jimena. It's as if she's disappeared." Esteban clenched his jaw. "She didn't disappear." Her voice was like a steel blade. "She's still here." The detective paused before continuing. "There's one more thing." Esteban looked up. "In recent weeks, there has been an unusual increase in the number of discrete plastic surgeries, expensive procedures, patients with no clear records. Some surgeons have been operating under confidential orders." The silence in the room became suffocating. Esteban's fingers clenched on the table. "Find those surgeons," he ordered coldly. "One of them must have operated on her." His smile was slow and cruel. "If she changed her face, then I'll have to rip the mask off with my own hands." That night, Alejandro entered the office and found Elena staring blankly into the mirror. She had removed the bandages completely for the first time, and the reflection she saw was not hers. Elena. No, Jimena. But even though her face was different, the terror in her eyes remained the same. Alejandro approached silently, not knowing what to say. Since he had operated on her, he had tried to keep his distance. It was the right thing to do, but every time he saw her like that, so fragile, so broken, a part of him wanted to break his own rules because he saw something familiar in her. He saw the woman he had lost, and that terrified him more than anything else. Elena sensed the danger before she saw it. It wasn't a noise, it wasn't a shadow at the window, nor a suspicious car parked outside the clinic. It was a primitive instinct, a chill down her back, a certainty that stabbed him in the chest like a dagger. He had found her. Esteban didn't know how, he didn't know when, but he knew everything. It had all started with small details. A black car he saw twice on the same corner, a man with dark glasses in the cafe across the street, who didn't order anything and just looked at his phone, an anonymous call to the clinic's reception desk, asking if they treated women with extreme changes in appearance. It wasn't paranoia, it was a warning, and he couldn't ignore it. That night, Alejandro came home later than usual. He had been performing surgeries all day and was visibly exhausted, but when he entered the clinic and didn't see Elena in the living room as usual, something inside him tensed. Alejandro called out as he walked toward her room. Silence. A bad feeling ran through his body. He pushed open the door and found the room empty. The bed was made. The few things she had were gone. There was only a folded note on the nightstand. "Thank you for everything. I can't risk you. Don't look for me." Alejandro felt a lump form in his throat. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed his coat and left immediately. Something was terribly wrong. Elena walked through the city with the hood of her sweatshirt covering her face. Fear kept her alert. Every muscle in her body tense. She had left, without saying goodbye, without explanation, without giving Alejandro the chance to stop her, because she knew he would. He would try to protect her, but she couldn't allow that. Esteban was close, and if he found her, if he caught her, he wouldn't let anyone else suffer. Not because of her. Not again. Meanwhile, Esteban held a photograph in his hands. It was a blurry image taken from a pharmacy's security cameras. A woman with her face covered, buying medicine. The facial recognition software didn't match Jimena, but he knew. He knew her. "You're good at hiding," he muttered with a crooked smile, "but not good enough." Felix, his head of security, cleared his throat. The cameras caught her near the clinic of a plastic surgeon, a certain Alejandro Cruz. He's the best in his field. If she changed her face, he must have done it. Esteban closed his eyes. "Find that bastard." Felix nodded and left the room. Esteban leaned back in his chair, staring at the photo with a dark expression. "I'm going to find you, Jimena," he whispered, savoring the word like poison on his tongue. "And this time, there will be nowhere to run." The night was thick and silent in the isolated house where Elena had taken refuge. The wind blew through the dry trees, creating an eerie murmur, as if nature itself were holding its breath. The small shelter where she was hiding was miles from any city, with no neighbors and no witnesses. a perfect hiding place. Or so she had thought, but fear would not leave her alone. She had not slept well for days, her body tense at every noise, every shadow cast on the wall by the moonlight. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Esteban's face. She knew he was looking for her. She knew he would not stop until he found her. But what she didn't know was that he had already found her. Esteban watched the cabin from the hill with a predatory expression on his face. Felix and another of his men waited for instructions. Behind him, it had taken longer than expected, but in the end, Jimena's trail had led him to this place. A cabin in the middle of nowhere, far from everything, far from any help. "Perfect. Wait for me here," he ordered in a low voice, taking the gun from his coat. Felix shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, if she's really there, we could bring her back without doing something so extreme." Esteban glared at him. "I don't want to bring her back like she's some nobody. I'm going to show her that no one escapes me." Felix looked away. He knew there was no way to stop him. Esteban smiled to himself and walked toward the house with stealthy steps. It was time to claim what was his. Elena heard a branch crack. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't her imagination. She froze, her fingers clenching the teacup in her hands. Her breathing became erratic. Then she felt it. She wasn't alone. She slowly got up, her heart racing. She walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside, just a little, but it felt heavy. She took a step back, trying to think. She had to get out of there. She had to crack the front door open with a brutal kick. Elena screamed and backed up until she hit the wall, her eyes wide with terror. Esteban appeared in the doorway, his silhouette dark against the moonlight, his expression cold and calculating, a gun in his hand. "Hello, princess," he murmured with a wicked smile. "I missed you." Elena felt her stomach drop to the floor. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "It can't be." Esteban closed the door behind him and watched her calmly, as if enjoying every second of her fear. "You ran well. You made me work, but you knew this was going to happen, right? You knew that sooner or later I would find you." Elena was paralyzed, her pulse racing, her gaze shifting from his face to the gun in his hand. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You don't have to do this." Esteban laughed softly with that cruel mockery she had heard so many times before. "I don't have to," he repeated, taking a step toward her. "Jimena, Jimena, how naive you still are. I'm not Jimena." He stopped and looked at her with something resembling astonishment, and then his expression twisted into a grimace of fury. "You think so?" he said through clenched teeth. "You think that by changing your face you can stop being mine? I was never yours, Esteban." He closed his eyes and suddenly lunged at her. Elena screamed when he grabbed her arm forcefully, pushing her against the table. She tried to struggle, but he was stronger. He always had been. "You belong to me, Jimena." His voice was poison, burning in her ears. "No matter what you do, no matter how far you run, you will always be mine." Elena felt tears burning in her eyes. No, she wasn't going to let him. She fought with all her strength, scratching and kicking, trying to break free. "Let me go!" Esteban laughed again, enjoying her resistance. "You think you can fight me?" He pushed her against the wall, squeezing her neck with one hand. "You think you can beat me?" Helena gasped for air, her lungs struggling. The room began to blur. No, not again. It couldn't end like this. Bang! The sound of a gunshot broke the night. And suddenly, Esteban let her go. Elena fell to the floor coughing and gasping, feeling the burning in her throat. When she looked up, Alejandro was standing in the doorway with a gun in his hand, his expression pure, contained fury, his breathing heavy. "Get away from her," Alejandro said, his voice firm. He looked at him in surprise, and then his surprise turned into something worse, into amusement. "Well, well," he smiled, wiping the trickle of blood from his lip. "The doctor appears to save his little princess. How touching." Alejandro did not lower his weapon. "I'm not going to repeat myself." Esteban clicked his tongue and looked at Elena. "So this is your new hero?" His voice dripped with mockery. "Do you think you can save yourself from me?" Helena felt anger boiling in her chest. She was no longer afraid. She was fed up. She looked around for something, anything, and then she saw it. a piece of metal lying on the floor. Without thinking, she picked it up and stabbed Esteban in the side with all her strength. He groaned in pain, his eyes opening in surprise. Alejandro seized the moment, moved quickly, and fired the second shot. It pierced Esteban's chest, causing him to stagger before falling to the ground with a thud. Silence. Only the sound of Elena and Alejandro's ragged breathing filled the room. It had ended, or at least that's what women like Jimena believed. They are not weak. They are not naive. They are not easy to manipulate. They are intelligent, successful, independent women with dreams and ambitions. Women who at some point believed they had found love in the wrong person. So why do they stay? Why do they endure? Why, when they have the means to leave and start over, do they often not do so? The answer is not simple, because abuse does not begin with a blow. It begins with sweet words, with promises of unconditional love, with small sacrifices disguised as protection. It begins when they convince you that they are the only ones who understand you, the only ones who truly value you. It begins when they give up a little of their power, believing it is love, when control is disguised as care, when insults are justified with "I love you too much," when violence is accompanied by tears and apologies, when the blows hurt less than the idea of being alone, because it not only leaves marks on the skin, it leaves scars on the mind, and most dangerous of all, it leaves doubt. What if I can't do it alone? What if no one else will love me? What if I am the problem? Women like Jimena don't stay because they have no choice. They stay because at some point they were made to believe that they didn't deserve anything better. But the truth is this: no one deserves to live in fear. No one deserves to feel that love is a prison and that escape seems impossible. There is always a way out. Jimena found it, and you can too.